Hello, hello. Welcome everybody to the Monday Mastermind. Kyle here, and as you can tell behind me, I am actually in our new house. We literally just got our internet set up probably about 10 to 15 minutes ago. So luckily the guy came right at 8 o'clock like it was supposed to. So I am here with you guys. Today we're going to be talking all about the repair process and kind of, how to look at home inspections, how to talk to your clients, whether you're on the buying end of it or if you're representing the seller, and setting realistic expectations for everybody just to make the deal go as smooth as possible. So I'm going to give you guys a couple of my pointers, a couple of the specific examples of some of the items that we ask for, some of the things I don't ask for. And so anyways, we're going to kind of go over all of that here today. It is going to be a little shorter as far as the topic that we're covering today. I didn't have slides or anything like that that I could prepare for. I got everything. We just got back from Las Vegas last week. We were at a EXP convention, and we got back late Saturday night and literally been moving and getting kind of some stuff in order for the big move, which is actually tomorrow, is when we have all of our furniture and things being delivered. So that being said, I didn't want to miss out though on the Monday Mastermind. This is super important to me, guys. You are all super important. I love all of the feedback. Everybody, chiming in with some suggestions, different topics that we can cover, and always just being consistent and showing up. And so, anyways, guys, hey, Steven, good morning. David, good morning. How's everybody out there doing today? I hope it's well. All right. So, without further ado, I'm going to get my notes and we will get going here. So, all right. So, first off, I think the first thing that I want to note is, to have a successful repair process take place, expectation setting is so important up front, whether you're representing the buyer, whether you're representing the seller. Kind of what I do as far as when I talk to the seller is I always make sure they're very clear that, hey, we're going to have two negotiations in this process. We have a negotiation when we accept an offer, and we're also going to have another negotiation when we get repairs done. And so I want to set that expectation up front that usually what we agree on as far as an offer price, we need to also have a little bit of money still backed into there and still have some money set aside for what's probably going to come on that repair amendment. And so, that's very important to have that discussion up front with the seller at the time of the listing agreement, at the time that you're accepting an offer. Do it multiple times to make sure that they're very aware that there's probably going to be repairs needed. And I even go as far to saying that, hey, standard, it's about 1% of your purchase price, just as a rule of thumb. That doesn't mean that's always what it is, but that's kind of what I prepare them for, and I do share that. And then I say, but hey, use that as with a grain of salt, just because it can wildly change depending on the condition of the house. But what I've seen most of the time is about 1%. If it's a $200,000 house, I'll see $2,000 in repairs. And sometimes that's actually probably a little high, but again, I'd rather be on the conservative side. So that way, if the buyer comes back and asks for, things that might add up to $1,000 or $1,500, the seller's pleasantly surprised. And so, and then same thing on the buying end, I always tell the buyer like, hey, here's kind of the expectations. As long as there's not something major, it's not like we're going to nickel and dime them for everything. Most of the time it's about 1% of the stuff that we might ask for. Now, obviously that all can vary depending on how much or how little it is. We don't just add in things just to make it the 1%, but I just try and set some kind of a realistic guide for them. So that way they're not thinking that they're going to just be asking for everything that the inspector notes. So again, expectation setting is so, so important. Explaining the process and how it actually works, typically what I like to do in my process, at least for the buyer, is that there are things that are obvious, things that we notice right away when we go into the property, even before we make the offer. I like to put those repairs into my offer. I think that it's a little bit harder to justify an offer or a repair amendment on things that were obvious when you guys walked through the house. So for instance, if there's grading issues, or like something that you just know, landscaping, or just cosmetic things that are major, like, rot on your fascia or trim, or things like this, or doors that bind or opening, like things that you obviously know when you're going through that home, you want to make that part of your initial offer, because it becomes harder when you get to the inspection part and you get to writing that repair amendment, that they're going to believe that you didn't see that, and whatnot. Now, regardless, I still know, there's some times where people will say, well, hey, I don't, I'm not an inspector, I'm not a general contractor, like, I didn't see that, or I don't feel comfortable asking for it until I know, that somebody has checked it out aside from me. And hey, I get that too. If that's the case, maybe don't make it as part of your initial offer, but make a note of it to the listing agent when you're submitting it, like, hey, just want you to know, here's our offer. There's a couple of things that, we saw while we were walking through. We're going to wait to ask for anything until we've actually made our repair amendment and repair negotiations. But I just wanted to give you a heads up that there's probably, this item, this item, this item that's going to come up. So at least that way you've discussed it, and they know that, potentially that there's going to be something coming, with regards to the obvious defects. Now, of course, what the inspection is really meant for, and what the repair amendment is really meant for, are things that are not obvious, and that's why you get a home inspector to come look at the property. You go out and, things like GFCI receptacles, or if there's things that are not grounded properly, or things that are inside the, electrical panel or plumbing types of items that you couldn't have known unless they did some specific tests, then those are, of course, the ones that you want to use that repair amendment for. But that being said, again, so it's really about those expectation settings. Let me see here. The next thing are, yeah, so what fixes are mandatory after a home inspection? So again, there's not a real clear answer as far as mandatory. Now, of course, if the buyer is getting like a VA loan, then there are going to be some things that the VA will require after the VA has done their appraisal on the property. And so those could be things, the way I like to look at it are things that are extremely, safety hazards, or, complete structural defects to the property. So for instance, of course, like if the foundation is not good, then of course that's going to get noted. That's usually a deal killer, especially for a VA offer. Found or roofing types of items, appliances. If there's appliances that are missing that should be there, like for instance, if there's, a double oven and the oven's gone or something like that, that stuff is going to get noted as well. And those are going to be mandatory in the sense that they're going to be required for the VA to give that buyer a loan. So, either the seller is going to have to make a choice on if they're going to make that repair or not, or lose the deal. And then the buyer, same thing. They need to know going in that, hey, you are a VA buyer. If we're looking at properties that are very rough, that may be a tough situation for you. A lot of times, they're going to need something that's, maybe, small things, cosmetic things, handyman type of items. But if there's anything that's, major defects wrong with the house, they're not going to get approved on that home. They may be wasting money for option money. They may be wasting money for an inspection, all of that kind of stuff. So it's really not in their best interest to be really looking at properties that are meant for investors, cash buyers, or maybe conventional buyers even. But anyway, so as far as mandatory goes, there wouldn't, other than the VA stuff, really be anything mandatory that gets done. Most of the time, it's really just kind of between the seller and the buyer to kind of come to terms with what needs to get taken care of. So, all right, let's see. Going on to the next one. Who pays for a home inspection? That's another commonly asked question with regards to home inspections. And in that case, it is, I would say, every time I've ever done a deal, it's been the buyer. I guess there could be a way that you could somehow finagle a seller into paying for the home inspection, although that is not the common practice. Common practice is that the home buyer pays for their home inspection. Ours out here in Texas typically run anywhere from $375, $350, kind of on the low end, all the way up to, I've seen them over $1,000, just depending on, if there's a pool, if there's a septic system, termite kind of inspections, general inspection, if the house is a large house. So, they can range anywhere from, about $300 on the low side, $1,000 on the high side. And then as far as new construction goes, a lot of times what buyers will do for new construction is they'll get three different stages of inspections. So they'll get an inspection done while the home is at foundation stage. They'll get a home inspection done while it's at frame stage before the walls, the drywall, and sheetrock is put up. And then they'll get their third one that's going to be taking place at the completion of the property. It's kind of like the final inspection. And, keep in mind now, most of what we're talking about today is on resale homes. Once you go to new homes, I mean, most of the time when we get an inspection report back on a new home, we're asking for just about everything. I mean, that thing is brand new. So even like small cosmetic types of items, those are all going to be asked for on a new home, new construction. And most of the time, the builder does take care of it. They just send in their subs back in there, their painter, whoever it is, and they can take care of it. Now on a resale home, it's pretty different. And I've actually got a list here of some of the items that I would not ask for on a resale repair amendment. And so, for instance, a new furnace, a new air conditioner, or a new roof just because it's old. That is not something that is typical in this, in this practice. You again want to set the expectation up front that, hey, that's not what this repair amendment for. Now, if it's deficient, if there's things that are broken, things like that, of course, then yeah, absolutely. If you've got your inspection report to back it up, they may need to go out and get a separate, foundation or a separate roof inspection, get a roofer to come out there or an HVAC person to back up what your general inspector said. But in general, you're not just going to say, well, that roof is 15 years old. I think that it needs to be replaced. I want that as part of my repairs. Now, again, you can do anything, right? Like, your buyer is your client. If they are, dead set on making this happen, of course, you have to listen to them. But again, before it ever even gets there, you should be setting these expectations so those thoughts aren't going through their mind. Because if you don't have these conversations, they're going to be going through this whole process, probably thinking about this, type of an item 10 different times or more. And then when it comes to it, when you try and tell them no, or that you don't think that that should happen, they've already had it in their mind for a long time. So it's a lot harder to change their mind at that point. So make sure, again, that you're setting expectations up front, that new furnaces, new air conditioners, new roofs, that type of stuff, you don't just repair, you don't put that in the repair amendment to have a new one put on just because they're old. That's not a typical thing. All right, so next we've got is hairline cracks in the driveway or foundation scratch coat. So a lot of times people will see on the outside, where the foundation's at, there'll be like a crack in there, or maybe even some of it's missing or fallen off, or the driveways will have some kind of hairline cracks in them. And buyers, if they're not prepped properly up front, they get worried about that stuff. They hear so much about foundations and what it can cause. So I think it's important to note, and hopefully your inspector is also helping back you up on this, that those types of items are not super important. There is a coat, a skim coat that's kind of on the outside of the foundation. And if you see cracking in that, that's not necessarily saying that there's anything wrong with the foundation. Now, if the buyer is concerned, if the inspector notes that not only is it cracking on the outside, but there's evidence to believe that there's more damage inside, well then by all means get a separate foundation company out there and have them take a look at at everything and make sure it's all good to go. But if it's just those cracks, like especially even in the driveway, I think it's worth noting to some people, because they don't always understand that a lot of times those driveways and sidewalks, that's all flat work. That's completely poured separately from the foundation. It doesn't indicate anything is wrong with the foundation. But again, if you don't have that conversation, buyers' minds kind of tend to go all sorts of different directions. So you want to make sure that they note that that's not something that you typically would ask for or even get worried about. Now, of course, if it's things that are going to be making it hard to even park in your driveway, or if it's like an unsafe condition on the sidewalk where the gap is just so big and it's breaking off, well then yeah, you might need to address that. But what we're talking about are like hairline cracks, less than kind of the width of like a quarter, or anything like that. Even inside the garage floor, again, same thing. So anyways, all right. So the next thing that we're going to look at is non-safety related plumbing and electrical items. So a lot of times, you'll see things on there, all sorts of like small little plumbing stuff, handyman type things, all sorts of small electrical stuff. handyman again kind of type things. If it's not really safety related, like if it's, like maybe the service panel, there's, not, it's not grounded or something properly, or something that's major and obviously could cause major issues. I mean, those are the things you want to focus on. But if it's just a smaller type item, even like, the hot and cold, being reversed on your plumbing inside the sink or something like that, again, I typically tell my buyers to fight, a different battle there, because chances are there's probably going to be a few bigger things that they're going to want to focus on versus some of those smaller types of items. All right, cosmetic issues. I think this is one, needs to be noted that, again, if it's a new construction, go ahead, ask away. I mean, hopefully they'll do a blue tape meeting with you where you can go and just, put all the cosmetic issues that you want fixed, and they typically will get addressed. But on a resale home, it's not, that's not typically the way that it's going to happen. For paint, if it's, uneven paint, or if they, touched it up and it doesn't match quite right, if the baseboards are kind of scratched up, or things like that. I mean, that's kind of just what you need to prepare the buyer for. That, hey, this is not a brand new home. I just want you to know that cosmetic issues are not something that we typically are going to be able to repair, or to negotiate in the repair process. Just want you to know that going in. And again, now they can change it, and they can, do whatever they want. They can ask for whatever they want. But if you have that conversation, you let them know, like, hey, typically when you move in, you can go and you can repaint, you can do whatever you want to do cosmetic wise. But what this is really for is to protect you, to make sure that you're getting a safe and sound house, which is what it will be, regardless of whatever the cosmetics might be at the time that you buy it. So that's kind of how I talk about that. Even smoke and carbon, dioxide detectors. I don't usually ask for, for these to be replaced by the seller as part of the repair process. Again, I think that they are important, but I think that it's also very inexpensive and easy item for the buyer to fix once they move in. Plus, they know that they're brand new. They can go out to Lowe's or Home Depot and buy them themselves, install them, or just get a handyman over to install them if they can't do it themselves. But again, that's one of those ones that's very easy to do. It's less than probably $150, $200 to do all of the smoke detectors and a carbon monoxide detector if they have that in that house, after closing. Any kind of repair item under $10, it'd be funny. I mean, a lot of times you think, like that I'd be crazy saying this, but I've got buyers that will ask for it. They'll say, like, switch plates are cracked and they want the switch plates to be replaced out on light switches. Things like light bulbs being burnt out and they want the light bulbs replaced. Like, all that stuff, I don't clutter up the repair amendment with it. I mean, that's very easy, super simple stuff to be done. You as the professional, you may want to make sure that you have somebody on your team that is a good handyman. Just like you have a good lender, you've got a good title company, you've got a good home inspector. You need to have a good general handyman, because that way, I think what ends up happening is, in most people's mind, they'll be willing to concede on these things if they know that they can trust you, that after closing it can be done professionally, fairly, as far as pricing goes. And so that's where, like, when I have an issue, things that I know that are pretty minor, I will say, hey guys, I totally get it. If I was in your shoes, I wouldn't want to fix it either. But that's not typical, and it probably may even potentially harm the deal, make it harder for us to get the things you really want done. And what I would recommend is you reach out to so and so, and after closing, and have them just come in before you've even moved your stuff in, and take care of those items, in a couple hours or less, just depending on what they are. And if you'd like, I'll give you his number. You can call him ahead of time, share with them what these items are, and just get a good feeling that these aren't going to be anything that's going to cost too much, right? So, like, they can give them a list. The guy that I recommend, his name is Steve McCleskey, and his company is called Inspection Correction. And that's what his job is. He literally goes in and he either, works on the seller side and fixes all the items that the buyer negotiates for the inspection to be done, or he can go in afterwards for the buyer. And, like, say for instance, if we negotiated a credit out of the seller to give to the buyer, well, then now the buyer has money and he pays Steve with it to go in there afterwards and fix all the items that the seller didn't want to do, instead just give a credit. So find somebody like that, ask around in your area, just get somebody that you can trust, that you can give out as a reference to your buyer, because a lot of times that's all that that it takes. If you don't have somebody, then start going through that buyer's mind of like, man, well, I probably won't be able to find somebody, or they just start getting nervous when you make it a big deal. That it's going to be, you don't know what to do or give them a next step in the process. That's when, again, the deals can start to go south. And so just make sure that you're prepared for that. Have somebody good on your team. Have 2 or 3 people good on your team. That way you can give them more than one reference if they need. So, all right, let's see. One of the last ones here. Landscaping items. Again, I don't negotiate for repairs on landscaping stuff. Plants are dead. Anything other than like if a tree is touching the house, or if a tree is caught up in like the electrical lines or anything like that. That's really all that I would negotiate for. But anything like with regards just to landscaping, like if the grass is dead or a tree is dead or anything like that, I even if the things, sometimes you'll find a plant that's too close to the house. Most of the time I won't even ask for that if it's not required. I'll just have, I'll tell the buyer like, hey, afterwards, you can pull that plant out. You can make it look how you want. You just never know, if you let the seller do it, how it's going to turn out at the end of the day, right? Because they're leaving, they're done with this house. So I mean, that's where you just have to kind of wonder what mindset the seller is going to be in to want to do that type of work. And so most of the time I'll say, hey, I get it. It's something that you can definitely do afterwards. I've got somebody that's great in landscaping. Let's get them out there. That way they can do it how you want it. And they may even be able to do a couple extra things for you while they're out there. So anyways, all right. So what else? We've got, all right, so here are some of the most common items that I do see in a repair amendment that I do recommend that be addressed, either with your buyers or with the seller, and just letting them know like, hey, these are, things that, do probably need to get taken place or get taken care of, whether it's this buyer or some other buyer. These are all going to come back up. So you might as well just fix them now. So some of these types of things are like GFCI outlets. A lot of times if you've got outlets in the kitchen that are not GFCI, or a bathroom, or that are outside of the house, if they're not GFCI, the inspector is going to note that they need to be. And I would definitely recommend you tell the seller or tell the buyer, hey, let's ask for this item. So roof deficiencies. So this is a big one. We see these all the time here in Texas. We get a lot of hail. We get just crazy roofers that don't really know what they're doing. And again, this isn't something like, well, the roof is just old, we need it replaced. This is actual deficiencies that were noted in the inspection. This could be something like missing shingles. I know, like, I actually just sold my house, and one of the ridge vents was ridge caps was missing on one of the peaks in the house the whole time, and the whole time I lived there. And so didn't even note it. It wasn't even on my inspection report, but when the buyers got one, they did see it. And luckily, it was just over a patio. But even still, things like that are major deficiencies. Maybe there's flashing that's missing. All that type of stuff is going to be asked for by pretty much any buyer that's out there. And so, as a seller, it's better just to get a roofer to come out there and take care of that item. So again, that's something where either if you have your inspection correction type of person, then usually, like, he's a general contractor, so he actually does some of the items himself, the handyman types of things. But then some of the things that need a license, he'll actually do that work for you, and he'll go out there and find a roofer, a plumber, electrician, and then that way you get all the invoices. They're all licensed, so you know that it's covered, and that's kind of how he handles that. If not, if you don't have somebody like that, then you just need to go find a good licensed roofer that you can actually have come out there and work on your behalf for that seller as that goes. So anyways, all right. So that's one, roof deficiencies. The next one, electrical panel deficiencies. We see a lot of these with the electrical panel where, I mean, for whatever reason, things aren't labeled properly. Things are, oversized as far as the breakers go. There, might not be a grounded, might not be grounded properly. All sorts of things that can happen with regards to the electrical service panel. And most of those things are going to be classified under the safety category. So again, that's just something that we typically will ask for, or as a seller, you should expect that you might need to take care of that. And they're usually not expensive things. The most expensive part is you just have to pay a trade call usually for the electrician or the plumber or whoever it might be to come out there. So you're going to be looking at $200-300 minimum. But most of the time, we're not talking, thousands of dollars for most of those types of items. All right, window seals being broken. So this is always it's like a 50-50 one. I like to ask for them, especially if we're not already asking for a whole bunch of other things. A lot of times my buyers want to be in a home where they can see out of their windows pretty easily. And if you guys aren't familiar with the window seals, we have, these double pane glass here in Texas, and I'm sure, all over the country. But a lot of times over time, those seals wear away. Then all of a sudden you start to see like condensation and fog getting into those windows. And so a lot of times when it happens, it'll happen on the entire side of the house. Usually it's like where the sun just kind of bakes and beats down. And so what we'll typically do is ask for those windows to be basically all of them looked at by a window company and have them all be reglazed or resealed. And it's not a hard thing to do. It's not like they have to put brand new windows in there. They're just changing out the glass. But usually it ranges anywhere from about $150 to $250 per panel as far as the windows go. So if it's, a top and a bottom, it could be a couple $100, few $100. And then however many windows it is. So it might end up being over $1,000. Most of the time I do see it being between about $1,000 to $1,500, depending on how many windows there are. So a lot of times, especially if the buyer wants to be able to see out their windows, and if it's a really bad job, like if the seal has really kind of gone, sometimes they're just a little bit and you can still, they look just fine. But if it's really bad and the buyers, then of course we'll ask for it, because they're not going to want, to close on a house and they have to go spend $1,500 just to be able to see out their windows. The other thing to make sure too is, I know a lot of times we've thought that the job is actually bigger than it is for the windows, but it's actually because some of the windows are just so dirty. That is another thing, is like, making sure that it's the seals are broken versus the window just being so dirty. So anyways, the next one is water in the HVAC drain pan. We see that all the time. I don't know if that's just a Texas thing or what, but we must be running our air conditioning so hard here that sometimes they'll get stopped up, like the primary drain, and then all of a sudden it's leaking into that pan. If you see water in the pan or any kind of rust in the pan, which kind of indicates that there used to be water in the pan, it's definitely worthwhile to get an HVAC person out there to service and clean the unit. And honestly, we usually ask for an HVAC person to service and clean the unit every time anyways, even if there's nothing to note necessarily on the inspection report, just because most home warranty companies require that there be an invoice showing that a licensed HVAC technician has looked at the property, looked at the HVAC and given it a clean bill of health before they would actually warranty any types of heating and cooling items. So that's kind of a protection for a buyer. And it's an easy sell to tell the seller or the listing agent, say, hey, look, my buyer's getting this home warranty. They require that we have an invoice showing that this HVAC system was looked at by a licensed HVAC company. Can we're going to add that into our repair amendment. I hope that's not a problem. Usually it costs the seller maybe $200 or so to get a company out there to look at it, give them just that quick invoice, check all the levels, make sure it's looking good, and that's it. That's separate again of a independent inspection, third-party inspection. The person that comes out there, the general inspector, they typically don't have all the equipment like a licensed HVAC company does. So that's why, again, the home warranty company is going to require that licensed HVAC tech to come out there. And so usually if there's things like rust in the drain pan, if there's, any kind of small minor deficiencies with the HVAC system, we just throw those in there and we say, hey, these 2-3 items, along with, just getting that clean bill of health, showing that it's, serviced and clean, that's what we need. So that's into most of our repair amendments. Thermal expansion tank missing. So this is one of those ones that's, on the water heater. I don't know, I guess it's a new thing. I don't know exactly when it started, but now you'll probably see that there needs to be this blue expansion tank up at the top of the water heater. And it will show up on just about every single inspection report if it doesn't already have it. And so like if they have not replaced their water heater recently, And in the last few years, it probably is going to need one of these thermal expansion tanks. I always put it in there just because, again, it is a safety item. The inspector usually makes a big deal about it. Now, I know a lot of homes are just fine without one, but all it takes is one house, for that to go wrong. And you're not going to be looking like the good agent that kind of, took care of your client. And so, again, I always just recommend we put that on there. And it's usually not super expensive. It's probably in that $350 to $500 category, as far as depending on which company you go with and what part of the country you're in. But it's not a big one, but it is one that we put into all of our repair amendments if it's missing or if it's deficient. Static pressure is too high, above 80 psi. So again, same thing. Like if they don't have a pressure reducing valve, they're going to need to get one installed. Not super expensive to put in, but it is again a few $100 to put it in there. But it's one of those ones that you do want to have it in there. And sometimes they'll have a PRV valve in there, but it's maybe not functioning properly. Like maybe they have one in there, and maybe it's not set at the correct adjustment. Maybe it's too high. And so again, just depending on whatever it is, we want to make sure that that pressure is below 80 psi, just because that's what code is. And as far as all of your pipes and things like that, you want to make sure that you're within the code there. And then lastly, another one that we will ask for, and again, I like to bring this one up in the front because I want the listing agent to know that, hey, like we're trying to be upfront with these people. So if we notice this stuff, like in the beginning, again, I either put it into the contract or at least let the listing agent know about it. But if there's like a bunch of wood rot, whether it's around the trim on the garage doors, whether it's on the chimney on the fireplace, whether it's just all around the house, if there, siding is bad, any of those types of things, we do ask for that to be done prior to closing. And so during a repair amendment, it's again nothing too hard, but a lot of times, and this one doesn't even require a licensed person. That the homeowner can do it if they wish. They can have a handyman come out there and do it. But either way, you just don't want to have the home have wood rot already going into it. And so those are kind of some of the most common ones that we do ask for. It's funny because I actually, to get all this stuff prepared and ready, I went back through like my 10 last repair amendments and just looked at them. And I was like, oh yeah, that one gets asked a lot. This one gets asked a lot. And trust me, there's all sorts of other little ones that you can ask for. I think, as kind of a general note, the good thing to do is get on good terms with your inspector and just like, make sure that after you receive that inspection report, or before he even sends it out, if he can call you and just kind of talk to you about it and say, hey, I know there's going to be, 50 things on here. What are like the 5 worst things? What do I really need to, kind of counsel my buyer on? And so anyways, and that's kind of the relationship that I have with mine. So that way, again, once the inspection report goes out to the buyer, I can be ahead of it. I can call the buyer and say, hey, you're about to receive the inspection report. I know it's going to have a bunch of things on it. I've already spoken to the inspector and he said it's a super clean house, but really it's just, these 3 or 4 items or these 5 items. And then we kind of go over that and I ask them, hey, are there any other ones that, after you see this report that you want to ask for? And if they say no, then great. We just go for those ones that were kind of mentioned. If they want to go for a few more, I might, kind of analyze and say, hey, maybe that one's not as important. Maybe you need to talk to the inspector directly. Like if you'd rather give him a phone call right now and just kind of find out like how important that is, or maybe we need to go get pricing for it. I might call up my general contractor and just say, hey, Steve, is this something like how much are we looking at on this particular item and all that? So now with all that being said, the one other option that of course we always have in the repair amendment process is getting a credit, right? Like that's always something that's available as well. And this one just kind of depends on your client, right? Like most of the time the seller, I would say, would prefer to give a credit just because again, they've got so much going on with their move, probably lining up what their next move is, that giving a credit is just the easiest way to kind of be done with it. And as a buyer, I actually really like that option. I try and have my buyer go that route, so long as the credit is, going to cover the things that we know that need to be happening. And the reason why I like that is because that way, and I can tell the buyer, hey, you get to, pick all of the contractors. You get to make sure that the work is done to your liking. All of the repairs were done to your name after you took ownership of the property. So, if you have to have them come back out, you're already familiar with them. and they know that they did work for you versus maybe the previous seller. And so again, the credit is not the worst idea. It's actually a very good idea if the buyer's comfortable with it. And of course, if the seller is comfortable with it. But every now and then you'll get a buyer from time to time that they literally just don't want to mess with anything when they close. They want to literally just get the invoices and know that it's done when they take ownership of it. And if that's the case, hey, I get it. And then you just have to kind of go with what they want and have those different items be taken care of. But again, the last thing I just want to end on is it all comes back to the expectations and setting the right expectations up front, whether it's with the buyer, with the seller, and just keeping them informed of how the process works. So that being said, guys, that's pretty much it. That's what I got for today. I will be back here next week, hopefully with my new home office setup. Be a little bit cleaner. Right now, I'm literally just doing this off my MacBook webcam and the lights that are above me. So it doesn't look quite as nice as what I like for it to. But again, I wasn't going to miss the opportunity to come to you guys and kind of give you what I wanted to talk about this week. If you got suggestions for future weeks, for next week, for any week after, please put it in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you want to hear about, what you want to talk about. And guys, I really appreciate it. My channel is growing. I'm getting more and more subscribers, which is just amazing to me. And a lot of feedback, a lot of comments, a lot of private messages on social media, on Facebook, on Instagram, just kind of supporting what we're doing here. So I just want to continue to grow with you guys, build this community up, and try and provide as much value as I can to you. So I hope everyone has a great day. Make it a great week. It's Monday morning, so you got the full week ahead of you. Hope everyone goes out there, get some prospecting done, get some deals in the pipeline, and we'll talk to you next week. Have a good one, everybody. Bye-bye.